This is a special meeting before we get into the council conference. So good evening and welcome to the City Council Special Session Meeting of June 7th, 2022. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Sedley?
Here.
Councilmember Schuler?
Here.
Councilmember Lynn?
Here.
Councilmember Hall?
Here.
Councilmember Tortorello?
Present.
Councilmember Foreman?
Here.
Councilmember Holman?
Here.
Councilmember Peacock?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Here. Item 1 and our main item for this evening that requires action, consideration of ordinance 2122-47 upon first reading by title, implementing amendments throughout the Center City Form-Based Code CCFBC document. Need a motion to approve or reject the ordinance upon first reading by title.
Motion to approve. Second.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to approve the ordinance upon first reading by title by a show of hands. All those in favor? All those, okay. That is you. All those opposed, same sign? All right, that is unanimous. Thank you. All right. Well done, team. Now on to item 2, presentation. See,
We move forward.
well, you know it. Presentation by a representative from Amber Integrated of the Water Increase Election Survey results. I'd like to recognize our amazing communications officer. Okay, there you go. Tiffany Verska to take the lead on that one.
Yes, so as you're aware, Mayor and Council, following the failed water rights proposition in April, we wanted to get some more feedback from the public, as far as insight as to why the election did go the way that it went, and see if we could improve on communications and see maybe what the issue may have been, making sure that everybody gets the message and that sort of thing. So we did a series of surveys. The first one was an online one that was open to anyone that wanted to fill that out, and that was open for 14 days. And then we also hired a contractor to do a statistically valid survey. And this is the gentleman here that's passing out the reports, Mr. Jackson Lyle of Amber Integrated Solutions of Oklahoma City. And so he's going to go over what they found in their survey.
All right, well, I want to begin with saying thank you for making an effort to understand this. As the only community in the state of Oklahoma that has to vote on the creation or raising of a utility, we need to understand this. So I look forward to your results. Take it away.
Thank you. So, as Tiffany mentioned, we first identified, obviously, that we needed to survey the individuals that voted in the election in April. And so to perform the survey, we did a voter match to pull those individuals from the election board that actually turned out to vote in April, and then we matched phone numbers with those individuals to survey them. We were able to get 400 individuals to take the survey, and it was conducted between April 28th and May 3rd. Margin of error just under 5%. So pretty accurate for a city of this size. Essentially, there were basically 3 main reasons that people voted no on the water rate increase. The number one reason was that costs were already too high. People couldn't afford the increase. That was the number one reason stated. Number 2 was just expressing a general distrust in municipal government, and that was at 21%. 14% of individuals believe that there was areas of spending that could be cut before a rate increase was necessary. In terms of partisanship, this was one of the starkest breakdowns in terms of what was going to predict somebody's voting patterns. Republicans, 57% of Republican voters opposed the rate increase, 38% supported it. Independent voters, 66% opposed, 32% supported it. Democrats were the only partisan voting bloc that supported the increase, with 66% supporting, 32% opposed. And you'll note later on in the crosstabs as I go through them, Democrat voters also had a higher trust level in municipal government than both Republican and independent voters. Obviously, this isn't a perfect reflection of how the vote turned out. I know a slightly higher percent rejected it than approved it, but of those voters that took our survey, the 400, 48% said they approved it, 48% said they rejected it. And I'll note that these survey results were weighted based on age, gender, and party affiliation. So it's a very accurate sampling of the Norman voters. If you look sort of at the, I pulled these out of the crosstabs, and everybody, sorry I didn't get enough printed for everybody here, but for those that do have a document in front of you, you can pour through. There's a second tab there called crosstabs, and feel free to kind of pour through that data and look at the ways that certain demographics or individual groups answered each question. I kind of on this presentation here, I kind of highlighted some of the ones that I thought were most important. And so obviously, this was a breakdown of how people said that they voted on the rate increase. So obviously we have our overall 48-48 yes. There wasn't really a major difference between men and women in how they voted. Those were pretty similar. But again, it's that partisanship is pretty stark there. So you see, Republicans and independents largely voting no, Democrats voting yes in favor of it. And somewhat surprisingly, independents were more opposed to it than Republicans. So, again, the other interesting breakdown was age. The age groups, basically 60 and older, were the only age groups that voted to approve the increase. So
60 and older?
60 and older.
Lee's like, what?
And I'll note too, obviously I think you all did a mail piece, correct, or several maybe on educating them about what the rate increase was going to do. Most voters acknowledge that they got that, but I will note that the 18 to 29-year-old cohort, only about 15% of them knew what the water rate increase was going to do. So they probably just, they knew they got the mail piece, they probably just didn't pay attention to it. And so, but again, there's a lot of work to be done there in that sub 60 age bracket. Let's see. Again, reasons for voting each way, and I've kind of got this broken down here. Let's see. If you look right there where it goes black, these are the people that voted no. Those are the people that voted yes. So reasons for people voting yes. Just a lot of these were just general positive comments. It's to move Norman forward. It's we need general improvements with the city, that sort of thing. A lot of people talked about investments. It's an important investment in the city, things of that nature. And then, there are a few that talked about water safety, cleanliness, things of that nature. And I'll note too in your documents there, behind the top lines, I've also got those verbatim responses included in there as well. So you can go through there and read. Again, there's 400 of them times several questions in there, so there's quite a few. But if you find yourself in the evening wanting to pour through these individual responses, feel free. And again, on the people that voted no, largely it was people said that they couldn't afford it, general distrust in government, and that they believe that there was waste that could be cut first. Where did voters get their information? Obviously, the top two here from the city of Norman, directly, and then Norman Transcript were the top two. Broadcast being second there, or third. I apologize.
Do we have any hints on what other is?
That's in your free response data. So a lot of it is I saw stuff on Facebook.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I talked to a neighbor about it. Things of that nature that are tough to put into broad categories. But again, that's all in your free response information there. 64% of voters said that they did get a mailer, and that's hard to see on this screen, but 23% said that they were unsure, 14% said no, which is actually pretty good recall for people that got an advertisement. So they do remember getting it. Again, it's just getting them to remember how it's used. So 79% of voters, when asked about the specific 3 projects that the rate increase was going to go to, did know that it was going to go to those 3 specific projects. Only 19% did not know how the funds were going to be used. It's obviously clear here that the top 2 reasons for voting, or which project was most important to them, water pipe replacement being one, groundwater treatment being the second. Nobody seemed to care about the advanced water metering, either because they weren't aware of what it would do or for whatever
We're
reason.
gonna get federal funding for it.
So,
That's what I heard.
so that's something that could potentially be a further voter education
That's
opportunity.
interesting. That's the one I always push the hardest because it
We
would
try.
benefit them the most.
People said, no, I heard we're gonna get a federal grant to pay for all of it, so I don't need to vote to pay for this. That's exactly what I heard multiple
Don't
times.
even get me started.
Either someone was telling them that and lying, or, I don't know.
Somebody
So-
would lie about municipal government?
Shocking.
And then we've got, this was another sort of indicator on which way people would vote, either to support or reject the measure, was trust in city government. You've got essentially just under 50% there that have little to no trust, and then just slightly over that have moderate to very high trust. Again, this is broken down largely by partisanship, and so you can kind of see each breakdown there. Obviously, the columns to the right indicate less trust, columns to the left indicate more trust. So you can see Democrat voters tended to have high to a lot of trust, or moderate trust as well. So the other thing to note too was, obviously, and you can see this in the verbatim questions, obviously this aligned with your all's, you had city council and mayoral elections as well. So some of it was like, I like the old person, not the new person, so now I don't trust it, or I don't like the old person, I like the new person, so I'm going to trust it now. So it just, there's sort of, this is something that could be interesting to see how this changes over the next, 6 months, year, so on and so forth, as voter attitudes progress.
Councilmember Foreman?
Sorry, a couple slides back, it was what percentage knew what this was for?
Yes, let me go back to that real quick.
So a majority of them understood what it was, but
Yes.
because they don't like 9 people, they're gonna hold the city hostage on a water rate increase. I'm just saying that, you don't have to.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. But, okay, 79%.
Well, yeah, and
It's okay, it doesn't hurt our feelings, trust me.
it is, and it's interesting, I mean, it is interesting to note that among Republicans and Democrats, there's seems to be a general lack of trust. I'm not here to tell you what to do about that, but that is an issue that seemed to be highly correlated with how people would vote in the election.
Okay.
Well, the next election should pass no problem.
And then what issues should the city focus on the most? The highest was homelessness, affordable housing,
Not surprising.
followed by more police and fire funding, and then streets, traffic. A lot of that was potholes, things like that.
What was
Hold on.
Sorry, Councilmember Tortorella.
So the other 15% or the other, is that just a consolidation of things that you couldn't put on the board? I mean, it seems like a.
Yeah, a lot of these were one-offs, individual comments. Again, those are in your verbatim.
Okay.
That you can kind of pour through those as well. They weren't comments that neatly fit into a category. Not to say they aren't important, but you can go through those individually and determine.
Any come to mind, just since we're not pouring over it currently?
No
fun ones stood out to you?
I will say some of this was, I did not edit these comments in there, so some of them,
You're not gonna hurt our feelings.
some of them are a little colorful, so,
What page is it on?
He said what page?
Okay,
There are
Joe.
no numbers, but
Okay.
you'll get there.
yeah.
I see it here, yeah, I can see why.
So
I hate
again,
that
keep that in
mayor.
mind, when you're reading that these are direct comments from the voters. Some
trying
are
to raise
positive, some are
property
negative, and
taxes.
sometimes the negative ones are a little bit colored.
So I voted no.
That's all I've got. I'm happy to answer questions, go through any other issues you guys might have or thoughts.
Okay, take it. One of the things that I'd like to focus on is communication. We can't change the partisan thing. That pendulum swings back and forth, and it'll go the opposite direction here pretty quick. So
Yeah.
fine. But in terms of the mailer, do you think we need to be promoting more on social media? Because I mean, you all did a fantastic job of hosting, ward meetings that 2 people would show up to. So I don't know if that's an effective route. So just your impression, your professional experience, what do you think is something that we should maybe pivot on or focus on more?
Yeah, given how a decent correlation was around age groups, I would think that more could be done on social media outreach, things of that nature. There we go. Maybe some
TikToks, educational TikToks.
no, maybe some video advertisements or things of that nature that are
It's safe to say that's a
quick and informative, things of that nature. Obviously, when you had the younger voters that said they got the mail piece, but then didn't know anything about what the water rate increase did, that tells you that those voters aren't at least digesting that information. So maybe there's other ways that you could hit them, potentially via social media, other digital platforms, things of that nature.
Thank you. Councilmember Foreman.
So, Chris, I can't even look at you. I'm so sorry about this. But, so I think, a majority, they knew what it was for. They're like, I don't like some of you. I think it would help that we let people know this isn't general fund money. This is like specific enterprise. So council's not dictating, we're going to give this water rate increase money to homeless people. That sort of thing. I think we just need to spell it out. As one possible solution.
In the verbatim answers, and again, you can kind of pour through those on your own, but there were several comments that were, they're just gonna take this money and build a homeless shelter, or they're just gonna take this
Right.
money and do some other project or something like that. So it's, and obviously, there were some more sophisticated voters talked about money being fungible and that they can then shift money to other resources that would be used for water needs. And so, yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Councilmember Holman.
So, Chris, all the projects and promises that were made from the last 2 water rate increases, have they all been completed as promised?
Yes.
Yeah. And is there any waste in the water fund right now to direct?
I tell everybody we're a nonprofit organization. We don't have any money sitting aside. We spend it all to repair and replace.
But everything we've said we would do and promised voters has been done.
Yes.
So we just got to figure out, why is it that we do things that we promise and they get done, but then people don't know or they forget about it? There's some disconnect there.
Yeah, it definitely helps.
And often at a lower cost too. I should mention, we often get projects done under budget. So I don't know what the disconnect really is.
The opportunity to take those successes, and I would argue that, yes, they were successes. In prior rate increases, we've asked for money for specific things and have delivered. And, historically, our educational process begins kind of once council adopts the ordinance and sets the date for the election. And maybe our ability to start that educational process now, 6 months, 12 months prior to the next time we have to go back to the voters and say, okay, we really need this money now, to be able to start just on a more regular basis, and definitely taking advantage of social media, talking about the last water rate increase. This was the ballot language, these were the projects, and here's pictures of the finished thing that we said we would do and have delivered to you. And not, talk about, so when we ask you again, but make sure that's the thing that's fresh in everybody's mind.
And I'll note too that, part of this could be just an issue of timing. There's a lot of general voter anxiety around economic uncertainty right now. And so a lot of those voters that did say can't afford, were, a lot of those comments were, I'm on a fixed income, I don't know how much further my dollar is gonna go, that sort of thing. And so it could just be an issue of timing.
Councilmember Hall.
Yeah, these are just general comments, and I really appreciate you being able to tease this out. This is really very interesting, and I am encouraged that the 400 people that you most of them felt like they understood how the funds would be used. So that's, I think, a testament to the kind of outreach that we were doing. But to your point, I think the timing is really important. If you all recall, we had originally wanted to do this election in January when it wasn't on a candidate election date. And because of how we're constrained by the state of Oklahoma in choosing election dates, that makes it a little bit problematic. And I know there's been a conversation that I think is going to be important to continue when we think about all of the increase or all of the issues that we need to take for voter approval, of really planning that out in a long-term kind of way, in a very intentional kind of way, and engaging our community stakeholders, and making sure that maybe it's not just the city that's putting information out too. And I think your point to younger voters is just spot on. Is how do we civically engage our younger voters who we really want to stay here and invest in Norman? How do we get the message out to them? And maybe we need a much longer runway on how we're talking about it.
Now, thanks for that reminder. And I'd also point out, many of these are not city issues. We've got school funding, gun issues, and
OTA.
Yeah, OTA. I have no idea how to make an effort to educate them on what each level of government addresses.
You can't.
Staff at our local hospital is lost.
So vote no on water.
City can't control it.
All right.
I was just going to bounce off of that too, and just make the general comment that personally, I think it's really important to remind our residents that this is a nonpartisan body. That's what it's intended to be, and that providing clean water also should not be a partisan issue. So we have to figure out a way to be able to address some of the, the misinformation, or using it as a referendum of some sort, one way or the other. We've got to be able to refocus our conversation on one of our most important responsibilities as elected officials is to provide for the public health, safety, and welfare of our community, and providing clean drinking water has to be at the top of the list. So, lots of takeaways here on how to improve messaging the next time around, but clearly it's important for our community, and we've got to be able to provide the funds that are needed. And, I'm just going to throw out one more thing too, and I know this would involve a charter change, but it is an enterprise fund. And so it is paid for the people who use our water. And we have a significant number of voters in the city of Norman that are not customers that are voting on water rate increases. And I think that's something that ought to be looked at too.
I agree.
Yeah, there were a handful of voters that said that one of the reasons they voted no is because they're on well water.
Councilman Foreman.
Hello. Is there a way that we can make an election, like you have to have a water bill to vote, or, how does that work?
Well, that's a good question. It's pretty unusual. I don't think the election board would run an election like that. So that would put us in the position of potentially doing our own elections, which brings up some other issues. But it also involves the charter language, as Councilmember Hall said, because in the charter it doesn't say customers have to vote on the increase. It's residents in Norman, and so that's our other challenge.
Okay.
It's a big one.
All right. Any other comments or questions for our presentation from Amber Integrated? Okay. Feel free to pour over this. Thank you so much again for doing this. We need to, it's very important. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, we are now on to item 3, a discussion regarding recommendations from the Economic Development Advisory Board, also known as EDAB, regarding the disbursement of American Rescue Plan Act funds earmarked for economic development and nonprofits. Ms. Walker, our city attorney, take it away.
Thank you. You all know Lawrence McKinney, the President and CEO of the Norman Economic Development Coalition, and then Chuck Thompson, our Chair of the Economic Development Advisory Board, both here as well. And I'm going to turn to Lawrence here in a minute to give you some information on the Incubator project. We came to you back in March with EDAB's initial recommendation that the $1 million that you all discussed allocating towards economic development initiatives be used for an incubator project. After that discussion with council, we went back and worked on an agreement, and you've got that attached to your agenda. It would be a sub-recipient agreement. And basically what it does is it confirms that we're giving the $1 million, and it sets out what it can be used for. And so in this case, it's a capital improvement, it's a capital project for this business incubator program. It has to be located in a qualified census tract. And then it requires some reporting to the city, which we also have to then report to the federal government, because again, we don't want to repay these funds back to the federal government. We want them used in our city. Part of the reason for EDAB's recommendation related to the business incubator program, it goes back years. We've had a successful business incubator program through NEDC for 20 years. Every economic development plan or policy that we've adopted as a city, that NEDC has done, that the ACOG has done for this region, all talk about the strength of business incubator programs and how important they are to a local economy, because it provides an opportunity for startups and for small businesses to get a strong start and sets them up for a successful business long term. So that was the goal with this plan and this agreement is to allow NEDC to make an investment that's more long term rather than short term. Something that we can get a return on time and again, honestly, if they're able to expand. I know Lawrence has got a PowerPoint he can hand out and talk to you about, but it's about their business incubator program and the success they've had over the last 20 years and sort of their plan for these funds going forward. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so briefly, I just wanted to go over our history and kind of what our expectations are if y'all allocate these funds to us. So on the first page, a little bit of history. We started 20 years ago with E-Tech. Many of you will recall that. It was on Asp Avenue, 10,000 square feet. It was purchased in 2000. And then our second incubator was E-Tech 2, which was on Flood Avenue. It was 5,000 square feet. It had some assembly space in it, so some higher ceilings. We eventually combined those two, and then it burned down on Asp Avenue. And so we opened up started 405, which was on the OU South campus, and then we consolidated it into the headquarters using space I had for employees of NEDC. But as I began to hire NEDC employees, we were out of space. We've got 3 tenants on site. We've got 3 virtual, which means they're just not on site, but they can come in and use the facility. They can use the training or the conference rooms or the intern stations. They still have to meet with me on their business plans. And then we've got a bit of a waiting list on that. All of these have always been on the tax roll, so we pay taxes. The next page, the tenant inception, you can't really tell, but there's about 70 companies on here that we've helped over the last 20 years. Weather Decision Technologies, Bison Underground's the new one, Southwest Nanotechnologies, Zion, Boyd Street, all of these have been a part of our incubator. The next page shows you the economic impact. So I mentioned in the last time that I spoke to you at the council meeting that direct jobs, 764 jobs with an average salary of $58,000. So the payroll, 47 million. These are annual numbers, by the way. Indirect jobs, the best way to think of those is business to business. So because these direct jobs of 764 were formed, those 70 companies have done business with other businesses. Those are the indirect jobs that have been created, 281. And then induced jobs, look at those as business to consumer. Because all the spending's going on in the economy, consumer types of retail businesses and services have been needed to accommodate them. So a total impact on an annual basis of $64 million. Advantages of being in the incubator, I don't need to sell you all on it. I think it spoke for itself over the last 20 years. But one of the quotes that was in my predecessor's documents is that we have the most successful state certified incubator because of our large commercialization rate. And when we were certified last year in November, this was something one of the state people said to me too. So I don't have the number to know that, but I know that the state and we have said that. And then the last page, this is kind of where we are. We've identified three buildings in one site, one greenfield site, if we build something new. Our expectations, given what we've just done on Main Street, is that it's going to be $1 to $1.5 million to buy a building, and it's going to be $1.5 to $2 million to renovate it. It depends on the size. So, 7,000 square feet is kind of the minimum I'm looking for. 15,000, 16,000 would be better. So if we end up with 7,000 to 8,000, we're going to be looking at $2.5 million. If we end up with 15,000, 16,000, we're looking at $3.5 million. 6 to 18 months to get into it. No matter what, if we buy a building next month, there's going to be some renovation, and just knowing how that went with us, I think we're looking at 6 months best case and 18 months worst case. And then the map is where these sites and the buildings are. So we've got a couple downtown. We've got one near Porter, and we've got a greenfield site that's within this purple area too. So don't really want to say which buildings they are just yet, but we've got 4 identified, and I feel pretty comfortable that all of those would work for us.
And those are all qualified census tracts, and that's one of the things that bolsters the eligibility for ARPA funds. The other thing that we talked about last time, Lawrence, is providing some focus within the incubator on minority-owned businesses, and so I know that's a plan going forward as well, and that's another thing that bolsters that ARPA fund eligibility.
So we were talking about $1 million, but this is 1 to 1.5 for purchase and 1.5 to 2 for renovation. Would you be asking for more?
Not from you all. Any DC could do it. We can borrow. We've asked the state for $1 million in ARPA. So hopefully we'll hear soon on our projects that have been submitted. But if the state doesn't come through, or one of our other sources that we're looking to, any DC would borrow the funds to do this.
And Lawrence, businesses that occupy incubator space do pay rent.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
that's how they'll be able to make debt service on any borrowing to renovate the facility.
And, the less debt we can have on it, the cheaper the rent can be. So, my expectations are around $500 a month for office space. That's really cheap. It's $1,200 to $1,600 in most places for that kind of space. But if we end up with debt, we might be at $800 to $1,000, so.
Okay, any questions? Councilmember Studley?
What do you guys use to measure success of your businesses that you raise up, if you will,
Well,
or
so-
incubate?
Great question. So everything we do is about investment and jobs. And so when a company is looking to locate in the incubator, we're going to sit down with them on their business plan and see what kind of jobs they're trying to create. We don't put retailers in the incubators, though. In the 2 spaces that we're looking at, there could be some incubator retail space that they could grow out of that we could assist them with. But we sit down at the front and determine, are you trying to create 25 jobs, 50 jobs? What are the average salary? And then there's a timeline. So minimum, in order to get the state benefits, you have to be in the incubator at least 6 months with us. And the maximum is 5 years. So somewhere between the 6 months and 5 years, the hope is they outgrow us. They've either got too many employees, they've taken up too much office space. We can expand office space and give them maybe 3, and maybe they can have 6 to 10 employees in there. But beyond that, now you're starting to take away from everybody else. So we'll have to graduate you out, to find some space. But it's jobs and investment, those are the 2
Okay,
things.
so you're looking at the number of jobs that it creates in Norman and the amount of money that those jobs are.
We'll generate.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schuler?
So on one of these slides, it has kind of all of the names of the companies that have gone through the incubator. Are they all still in Norman? Are they all still operating? Like, what is the, retention in our city for our incubator?
That's a great question. So we're actually going back through and documenting right now where they are on number of employees and who's still here. And a couple of things that we've identified is that some companies have hired people here. Maybe there's 50 employees in Norman, but they've expanded into the metro, and they might have 30 outside of Norman. So we're documenting that. And then actually I said 764 jobs, but as of today, we've documented 1,048. I just didn't put the impact in here because we're not done with that. And that would account for the last 5 years. So we're looking into that, and that's important to know how many of those jobs are in Norman.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Hall.
So, in January, or when we first started discussing this at the council level, I think it was a little bit later than that, we have already discussed that it's important that the physical facility be located in a qualified census tract. And so, obviously, you've met, that piece of it. So, the other thing we talked about that's going to help be able to justify how we're spending ARP money is prioritizing minority-owned businesses that were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, including women, minority-owned businesses, Native Americans, and veterans. So how are you planning on doing that?
Yeah, so part of it is on the branding and the promotion of it. So we're calling it a Center of Excellence for Women, Minorities, Native Americans, and Veterans, and we're going to target those groups. How it actually work in practice is like our waiting list now. We'll give priority points to those that are in those groups and move them to the top of the list. So, we're going to vet everybody, and you don't have to be in one of those groups to be in it, but if you are, you're going to get priority.
Excellent, thank you.
Councilor Peacock.
In your search for available property, do we look at any city-owned buildings by chance? Or are these just properties that are on the market?
None of these right now are city-owned, but you do have, there's actually 2 greenfield sites. One, y'all aren't aware of, but the other one could be Asp Avenue that you bought back from us after it burned down. So we could go back there.
It's a parking lot.
So it actually makes 5 sites if we were to consider that one.
That's interesting. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you for the update.
Okay, so this agreement, with the council's consent, we'd like to bring it forward at the next meeting, not the 14th, but the 28th likely. If everyone's okay with that. The other thing I want to mention is this provides a good format for other subrecipients. One thing that EDAB discussed at their last meeting was council's allocation of funds to other nonprofits. And so the discussion has been at the staff level is how do you vet those and what kind of process do you need for those? Because we also want similar documentation to ensure that we are complying with ARPA, that we're not going to pay these funds back, that we're going to be able to make the reporting requirements work. And so this actually provides a good format for those disbursements, but the United Way, using their existing process for nonprofits, could be a way to, or it could be a means to vet proposals. And so that's what EDAB discussed, and the recommendation there was to move forward with an agreement with United Way. Don't have that drafted yet, but to vet those proposals, thinking they would then come forward to council with these subrecipient agreements with those different agencies. And that was another category council allocated $1 million to.
Okay, Councilmember Hall.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that piece of it in your staff report, because I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm going to say, because I'm fully in supportive of moving this forward. But we actually began discussing the $1 million allocation for nonprofits, and there were specific nonprofits that reached out to us very early. It was first mentioned at our council retreat last July. We brought it up again multiple times in the last, over the last year almost. And, or at least my understanding was that we were reaching out to United Way, that kind of conversation was in place. And I'm delighted that, this body also wants to move forward in that direction and supports that. But I'm just a little surprised that we haven't gotten any farther on that when we started talking about that in July, and we only started talking about this in March. So could you update us on where we are with all that?
Absolutely. So I am fortunate to serve as a board member with the United Way, and in my initial conversations with Darren, the CEO of the United Way, they were intrigued by the opportunity to utilize the systems that they've developed over the years to vet. And when the conversation started, obviously the ability for us to encapsulate council's priorities in the criteria that their selection committees would weigh applications against That was just a conversation that needed to take place earlier. We had 3 individual requests that came into council, and they were initially requests for brick and mortar, and that did seem to resonate with the council, that an investment in brick and mortar will pay dividends long into the future, whereas some operating capital could be gone in a year, and a little tougher to demonstrate how we've impacted the lives of those persons impacted by COVID-19. So the United Way was in the process of doing their annual evaluations of their usual grant recipient group. They've now completed that process, and their committees are available. Again, we could potentially just grab one of those committees. They have 3 or 4 different groups that focus on different types of services, but depending on council's final decision in terms of is brick and mortar, a higher ranking type of support, and is there a minimum or a maximum that council is interested in providing to any single recipient. What we do know is through those applicants, and council did indicate that they didn't want these dollars limited to current United Way recipients, but open and available to any of the nonprofits. Most of the United Way recipients, the United Way provides just a portion of their operational funding. On rare occasion, the United Way will support an investment in capital like a kitchen remodel for a Meals on Wheels type preparation. So a couple of little details we'd still like to work out with council, if there's a maximum that any one particular applicant may get, and maybe it's in 2 categories, a maximum for operational dollars and a maximum amount if there's a brick and mortar investment to come along with it. It could be to buy or remodel or make tenant improvements on a building that they may currently occupy. So just questions that we needed to work our way through and make sure the package we deliver to the United Way has your fingerprints on it in terms of how you'd like those dollars to go out.
I definitely,
I'm sorry, what do you see as the timeline? Because this has literally been a topic of discussion for almost a year now. So how could we fast track that?
We would propose to bring you the appropriation in the next agenda or 2, making those dollars available. Catherine and I talked about a process, and it can be done 2 ways. We can retain the dollars, run the process through the United Way, get the funding list, dollar amount per recipient. We cut checks. That gives us a little more control on the reporting side versus us hand the check to the United Way and just have them disperse, because the reporting obligation is always going to fall back to us. But we think we could deliver the council priorities to the United Way before the end of next week, after the next council meeting, and they would send out the notice of funding availability probably the week after.
Okay, we're still waiting on the state. The state's been slower than molasses on handing theirs out, and I do think there's benefit in seeing what the state ponies up for. Cause we know on an application, I would love to see, have you applied for state funds, how much? Because that might determine how, you know what I mean? So that's something the only reason why I would want to wait at this point, because apparently it's coming.
They're telling us July. We're supposed to hear thumbs up, thumbs down.
So, and I'll throw out my 2 cents. I like brick and mortar because it's a good use of one-time funds. Councilmember Studley?
You might want to ask first because you may be
No, go ahead.
answering something.
Well, I was going to speak directly to the comment about the state. There was supposed to be a meeting earlier today, of their Joint Committee on Pandemic Relief Funding at 2 p.m. to talk about $25 million for nonprofit spending. And so it looks like the correspondence that went out through the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits was that they were talking about a $25 million fund, and the way that they are organizing it is organizations with revenues less than $750,000 a year would qualify for $50,000 grants. Organizations with revenues so less than is $50,000. More than $750,000 a year qualify for $75,000. So they're doing it based on how much the organization's revenues are.
My God, we're
That's what
talking
they're-
like $500,000 requests, and they're throwing out the
Yeah.
pennies of
Pennies,
50,000.
and they got 25 million in the bucket to start with.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I don't know, there was a meeting about this today, so, but this is what was being pushed out. Qualifying nonprofits must have a primary mission aligning to housing security, food security, behavioral health, substance abuse and use, human trafficking, and domestic violence is kind of what they're targeting. Show a negative impact stemming from COVID-19. So they were having a meeting about that earlier today.
Does
So we
not
would need to
sound
see.
helpful as I was hoping it would be.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying that's what they've been considering.
50 to 75,000, when you talk about, the potential of $1 million available, how many nonprofits could you hit at $50,000 a piece?
Well, I mean, their pool is 25 million.
Yep,
So that's a different,
and statewide.
and statewide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I was gonna ask, is, you had mentioned that United Way will be willing to work with businesses that don't fit their model.
Correct.
Okay. That makes me feel okay because I don't necessarily agree with the way that United Way goes about their stuff, but that's not for this conversation. The other part is, I'm kind of leery on deciding, and unless this is something that we have to do, on assigning a cap amount for applicants, because I know whenever we had the first round of CARES Act funding, I don't think we used it all for some of the issues that we had, like residential rent, utilities. I don't think that was maxed out. So I'm curious what the number of applicants are that we get, and could we wait until we see that and then kind of divide it from that, or how does that?
So a two-step process. I wouldn't see why we couldn't, just recognizing that if the United Way puts out a notice of funding availability, applications come in, council has a study session, we talk about the number, we talk about, and, part of the weight, tell us how many lives you can impact
Right.
with your application. I think we could absolutely do that in two steps to make sure council, you might be able to set your floor or your ceiling after you recognize how big that applicant pool is. So that's, I think would be a very reasonable request to take back to the United Way to say, let's do this in two steps. And because we can get it scheduled, we're having conversations every single week, so we could respond very quickly and not put a big delay in the process.
That's what I would prefer if you guys would be willing.
I think it will be larger than you think, based on what I'm hearing.
All I'm really trying to point out is the fact that this has been a priority that we've identified since July. And that, I just hope that we can keep it on the front burner now to develop the process and the process that you're comfortable with. So I'm not here to say, oh, we need to do this next week, but, we've made a lot of progress just since March on this particular topic. And I think we can do the same on something that we've been talking about since July.
And to that, when the initial conversation came in from 3 nonprofits on the brick and mortar request, everything was verbal. And the 3 nonprofits at the time were not yet ready to utilize those dollars for their construction projects. So that really did kind of slow down a lot of the conversation. Now some of those projects are beginning to come out of the ground and break ground, and they're finishing those capital stacks. So I think the realization is at least from those initial 3 requests, it's becoming real.
And I think we realized at the time that, they were some of our larger, more well-established nonprofits, and just were paying attention to what was available as funding sources. And I think we realized as a council that we needed to open that up to others, and have been contacted by multiple other nonprofits too.
And Catherine, maybe you can help jar my memory. Initially in the ARPA bucket of 22.4-ish, that when the 3 initial requests came in for the brick and mortar investments, they were $500,000 apiece. And that seemed to get tentative consensus from council. And then the conversation among council was, what about other nonprofits that had not had the opportunity to request? And if I'm not mistaken, council allocated another $1 million for that group.
Correct. I don't recall whether there was a separate allocation, because we talked about it in July and then we came back in August and talked about it again. And I don't recall whether or not we had a separate allocation for the 3 nonprofits we had not gotten a written request from at that point. Keep in mind, the other thing is we didn't have a final rule from the IRS until January. And so although we discussed the economic development piece and the nonprofit piece at retreat in July and again in August, we didn't know what the final rules were going to be, and we don't want to pay this money back. So it was important to get that, and the government was extremely slow to get us that.
We can
rule,
have all
but-
that detailed in our staff report for the,
Yeah.
for next Tuesday with the appropriation request as well.
Councilor Schuler?
So I think a couple of things. Just wanted to speak to the point that Councilmember Studley was talking about trying to figure out what is appropriate to, I guess, pinpoint as amount of dollars to spend. My hesitancy with saying we don't know what the amount is going to be, that it's really hard to write a grant to not knowing what the ceiling or the floor is going to be as someone who has written grant projects. So most of those give some kind of benchmark or parameter to say. My suggestion would be that maybe we allow for second round. If we don't expend all of the funds, like people can come back and submit a second proposal, so that there's an opportunity to get more. But I think it's hard to say like, oh, it's an open-ended thing because we're gonna get proposals that are $500,000. And so I think we've got to think about limiting it at some capacity to provide opportunity and understanding of like, this is what we can ask for or what nonprofits can shape their proposals into. So there needs to be some kind of guideline.
And just kind of a scale, there are several United Way recipients from their current, and typically they'll, allocate $1 million. 25,000 is a big chunk for, an individual recipient. Some of the biggest and some of the most successful nonprofits that touch the most lives measured, $100,000 would absolutely be the upper end out of anything coming from the United Way. But there are some that apply for $1,800 in their request to the United Way. So a pretty good range. And if council did say the ceiling per applicant may be 50,000, it does give the writer the opportunity to say, okay, now it helps you kind of put your thoughts in a nice, concise statement. And then if all the dollars aren't requested, you either remove the cap or you go back for round 2.
Yeah, I mean, I want to provide the opportunity because I understand what you're saying about like, we don't want to have surplus, we don't want to leave, we want all of this money to go into the hands of nonprofits that need it and have, to be able to be used for all of the things that are, pandemic relief, COVID-19 impacted. But just trying to think about how we shape the application to make it easier for our nonprofits to kind of target and think about how they're writing proposals, because it can be challenging when it's really open-ended. My other question was going to be, are we going to have a discussion, is that now, or another discussion about all of the benchmarks or things that we want to target in an application, or things that we're going to prioritize as council, that we want to see nonprofits talking about capital improvements or talking about other types of services or things like that? Is it appropriate to have that conversation now if we're trying to fast track things? Councilmember Hall is talking about, we have had a lot of time to sit and kind of think about this, but is there another study session that happens about this, or does it just come and we are
Could
doing
be a
that
retreat item.
Yeah, right.
And just to make sure we agendized it in a way that might allow that conversation. If you have thoughts tonight, be happy to take those down and incorporate those, just so these thoughts that you have in your head right now are fresh. We don't lose them in that conversation. We can always add to those before the notice of funding availability goes out the door. So as long as we're agendized in such a way that would allow us to take that council input, happy to take it.
Yeah, it's fine. Is it okay? I definitely think that based on previous conversations, all of most of us, I think, or I won't speak for everybody, but capital investments did seem to be a priority to many members of council because of the dividends that will pay in our community into the future. So I would like to see those things still prioritized. But I don't think that we can forget about direct impact into services. I think we need to think about balancing those items. I think that we would be remiss if we put all of that money just in brick and mortar type things without thinking about direct services that we're providing into to people. So,
And those capital demands on the nonprofits, big ticket item from the nonprofit's perspective may not seem like a big ticket item when you're looking at the distribution of $1 million to nonprofits. So those can be some of the most challenging things that some of our smaller nonprofits face is, I need a kitchen thing or I need a delivery thing, and maybe it's computers and communications capabilities. So that capital improvement for the big guys could be some brick and mortar, could be furniture. For the smaller guys, could be a single piece of equipment. It could be a real game changer.
Councilman Foreman.
So my job now is I'm CFO of a nonprofit who wheels and deals in state and federal grants every day. My suggestion would be, as far as like capping things, the way that we do it with our subrecipients. So like create like a sliding scale based on their previous year's 990. Like if you're serving hot dogs out of the back of your trunk to homeless people, your revenues you shouldn't be asking for $500,000 sort of thing. So I think we should, when we award it, we can have it in a sliding scale like that.
Fascinating.
That's what we do.
Well, the beauty of folks who do that every day versus us who rarely get an occasion, here's a bucket of money to go do something.
Oh, I'm sure
with,
Francisco would have thought of that. He's way smarter than me. Way smarter than me. But.
Any other thoughts on things we want to jot down now for a later discussion? Hopefully we'll have more information from the state as well. Anything else you'd like to see included on this list for now?
And if it's helpful, we can prepare something and bring it to retreat, so you'll at least have something to start with.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Councilor Peacock.
Yeah, I'm in favor of taking a balanced approach to this, but it's something that Mayor Clark said a second ago, just using these one-time funds for one-time uses. I think that's going to be the smartest use. And, I hate to get in a situation where we've, covered salaries or ongoing expenses with this and just dig ourselves into a deep hole.
You could be a little more direct with that and say it cannot be used for staffing.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
we
Operational
foresee.
overhead.
Yeah.
direct programming, capital
Infrastructure.
infrastructure, yeah.
Councilor Studley?
I don't want to limit it in saying we want it to be focused on just throwing some things out there, like just on homelessness, or like if we have like 4 or 5
by issue.
categories, because what I feel like is we have a lot of really, really smart people out in our community that think of things that we, of this short amount of people that we have here, can't think of. And so I would really love to hear what everyone's input would be, of what their ideas would be, and let the creative juices flow, because there might be something that comes out of this, you know what I mean?
Our ability to highlight in that notice of funding availability what the criteria is released by the U.S. Department of Treasury, just to say, okay, potential recipients, keep in mind, we're gonna have to do reporting based on the lives you touch.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that'll kind of set the broadest framework, and they can fill it in any way they see fit, and we'll still be covered on the paperwork side. Excellent.
All right, seeing no other comments about item number 3, on to item number 4, discussion regarding a loan application for funding from the Oklahoma Water Resources Board to purchase advanced metering infrastructure, AMI meters, for a limited pilot program. Nathan Maddenwald, our utilities engineer, is going to make the presentation.
Wrong, Brenda.
That's that long. Bryce, if you can hear me.
A really long word, is that what's good for
Bryce.
Bryce.
Caw.
You mean you have my handout for us?
No. I could have done it. Sorry, thank you.
doesn't have the paper budget anymore.
We'll actually see what it does. Maybe they'll get on board for it next time.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for taking some time for us to talk about our water metering situation and present some new information. May have heard about our grants, and we were successful in getting some grants, and just kind of wanted to touch base with council and see where you guys would like us to go with our water metering. So just real quick overview, talk about where we were at on our AMI project, what our current situation is, some of the additional funding opportunities that are out there, different paths that we could try to move this forward, like different ways we can move our metering forward, and then some light recommendations we'd like to provide, and then discussion to see where you all think we should go. So, okay, so current status. So we completed our assessment report in September of 2021. Went through and did a grant proposal to the BOR, submitted that in November. We were doing the procurement kind of in tandem with that, and also doing the rate vote. So we've got our draft request for proposal that we prepared. We're reviewing that now from our consultant. We've kind of been slow playing that a little bit, just based on waiting on, since the rate vote didn't go through the way we wanted to, we wanted to see what the grants came back as. And then also, our staff's been looking at our metering situation and how efficient we are at reading, where we have pinch points and problem areas. So looking at what could we do to try to improve that, to make it be where we get more reads on a regular basis. So for the additional funding, we submitted, as I said, in November 2021, we submitted 2 applications. The BOR had a Water Smart grant opportunity, so looking at water and energy efficiency projects. They had 2 pots that you could submit under. One was a $500,000 grant. The other one was a $2 million grant. So we submitted under both those. We actually won the Water Smart component for the $500,000. We're successful there, but we're unsuccessful in the $2 million. But what BOR did was they saw merit in the project. They rolled it over into another funding opportunity. So looking at the bipartisan infrastructure law, some funding that they were getting for that, and said we were successful for $2 million under that program. The only thing is you only can select one or the other. You don't get both pots of money. You just get to choose which one you want. So we'll come back to that one a little bit when we talk about the different project options we're considering.
On that one?
I know. You have a favorite.
Well, and then the additional funding from OWRB, they're also going to get money under the BIL, so that'll be through their Clean Water State Revolving Fund program. It'll be a loan forgiveness. They're going to do $9 million for the next fiscal year with a maximum of $500,000 per entity, and it's on a first come first served basis. So they're starting pretty quickly in August. They're wanting to start getting that money out, and they're going to require you to have prices in hand. So not just studies, but actual, like, okay, we're ready to hit the ground running. That one will be tight to try to hit. So just being honest, but that is another one out there that we could potentially push and try to get forward. So kind of taking a step back, we wanted to just we've talked about the AMI project and why we think it's good, but we also just kind of wanted to highlight, BOR, they've got varying amounts of applications coming in, and they saw that there was merit in our project because it is a project that will conserve water and electricity. So they see it as a benefit. BOR is somebody that does water supply for a lot of the western states where water scarcity is becoming a real issue. I mean, you guys see the news a lot. So they see that there's value in this project. Also, in 2018, American Water Works Association, they did a state of the water industry. They did a survey. They found that 61% of utilities are doing AMR, which is similar to what we've been talking about, except instead of it going up to a network or a cellular, it's just a drive-by. They drive a truck by and it reads it on a monthly basis. So you don't get some of the real-time data that we would get through an AMI system, but still 61% in 2018 were utilizing an advanced water metering type infrastructure. Similarly, 42% were already going to AMI, or were already either in AMI or going to AMI at that same time. So you can see this is a push for the utilities. This is just kind of the general trend of the industry. As this technology gets better and better, more utilities are going to move this way. And to further that, just the bottom right there, looking at business research, they're thinking that endpoints or the sensors that are going to transmit the signals on the meters, the sales of those are going to double in the next 6 years. So They see this as being something that more and more utilities are going to keep doing. So kind of coalescing all that together, we looked at, okay, so what do we do now? So the rate vote didn't pass, but do we not do anything? Do we look at hitting some of our problem meters to where we can maybe get better reads? Or do we look at implementing AMI in some sort of phased approach? And as I go through each one, we'll talk about what the impacts are for those grants that we mentioned before. So obviously, we're short on funds. Free money is hard to really turn down, but also that means we're spending some of our money to use that free money. So, okay, so if we look at the no meter changes, so what are we talking there? We're talking about everything stays the same way that we are now. We don't spend capital on any meters, but we're probably going to be in a situation where our staffing level right now, we won't be able to read those meters continuously going forward. We're probably going to have to add staff as we move forward. So we'd have money available for other capital projects, but we'd have to hire more staff, so we're spending operational money and kind of like you're talking about, not getting that actual improvement. So it's some money we're going to have to spend going on. Our inaccurate meters would remain in place. So we're not going through and changing out those old meters. So if they're inefficient and they get read slower and slower, then we're going to lose that revenue. Non-revenue waters would remain high at 20% or thereabouts. It varies a little bit year to year. We would still get monthly reads, so we don't get that real-time data or near real-time data to notify people of leaks or see how people are using water to better understand it. We wouldn't be able to have that grant funding. And then we don't have a path forward on our water meters. So we're not moving forward. We're just still installing the old mechanical meters, and each new house that gets built would have that old style meter. So option 2 looks at, okay, we've got about 5% of our meters that are really challenging to read. So you think about when our guys go read meters in a neighborhood, they park a vehicle and they go walk around and they come back to it. That's a little bit easier to read. If you think about how they go to businesses, they're going to have to drive to a business, get out and go read a meter, drive to another business, get out and go read a meter. So those are a lot less efficient. So what they see is if we took those trouble meters and primarily commercial meters, converted them to AMR where they could just drive a truck by, I think that we would be in a situation where you wouldn't have to add more staff. We'd have a limited capital expense. So we'd have money available for additional projects. Problem would be is it's only 5% of the meters, so a lot of the meters that are inaccurate would remain that way. We would still do monthly reads on only those 5 meters. So we wouldn't see, and then we'd probably lose the grant funding on those. So options 3A through 3D looks at the AMI initiative and looks at rolling it out kind of different ways. One, at doing it, we presented this back to BOR because when we initially did our grant application, they reviewed it based on us doing the whole project. So we said, we really appreciate the funding opportunity, but we didn't get our rate vote, so we wanted to see what level they might still fund us with the grant. And so the 25 and 50%, they said that we could use the small grant. If we did the 75 to 100%, we could get the full grant, is what they believe. So if we did option 3A, which is looking at, say, we have about 40,000 meters. If we did 10,000 of them, we would see that same benefit as option 2 because we would hit those trouble meters first, and then we would just slowly start targeting our system, and we could do phased implementation year to year until we got all the meters replaced. And that, not talking about that in that 5.95 million in the capital expenditure, but so we would see the improved meter reading efficiency without the additional staff. We'd have a path forward for future water meters. So each new meter we put in, we could say, okay, this is what we're going forward with. So that way we're still moving a little bit down the road. We still have a lot of inaccurate meters in the system that we'd have to replace. Our non-revenue water would still remain high. And then we would miss out on that $1.5 million of BOR funding on this one. So the 50% one, I won't go through all these. It's really similar. The capital expenditure on that would be about a little over $9 million for us to do that. If we go to the 75% one, then we get to capture that $2 million in the BOR grant. Now we're getting a bigger percentage of our system, so we should see more and more benefits. And we'd only have 25% less to go. And then if we do the full 100%, obviously we still get that same grant, be able to roll it out to our system as more efficiently. Don't pick and choose which areas get the improvements, which areas don't. So ran through all that real fast. Is there any questions on that component?
Councilman Berlin.
For the cost?
Just for my education, I'm not sure who to ask, maybe maybe Chris, Catherine, but you know how we can't increase the water rates. We can't ever add fees either because we did connection fees. Can you not add a fee to a bill for an AMI fee to the bill?
You can add fees without going to the voters. I think we'd have to look at that request specifically. I think the concern is it's been part of the rate package. I mean, certainly with the rates come certain expenses that are fixed and aren't necessarily based on use. So it's figuring out what is truly justifiable as a fee versus what should be rolled into the rate. And because we are the only city in the state with this problem, it's very hard to find guidance in case law on that. I have a lot of research on what's a rate, what's a fee, that kind of thing. But it's just a challenge, and we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I'm happy to look into that more and see if that's something we could do.
Yeah, say if it was.
We have done some of that sort of thing for optional services, sanitation, extra polycar stuff, for example.
Well, and that's say if you want it, if you make the case like, hey, this is likely might reduce your water bill or save you if there's leaks, it's $5 a month. And then over the time, it's gonna pay for itself anyways.
Having a meter though is not optional. It's not, I don't think this fits well. I'm just saying.
It's optional to the smart meter. That way, you sign up for it, and you're paying $5 a month. It might, I'm saying if you had it all on all 40,000 something, that's what 200 something thousand a month additional revenue. So you're getting $2.5 million a year over how many years it's going to pay for itself.
So based on Councilmember Lynn's thought, the concept of OG&E offers optional services. You can, on your electric bill, check a box that say, I want to pay for 100% renewable energy. Now, obviously, the electricity in that line, heaven only knows where it comes from, but you can check the box and you'll pay a premium and you help support those green initiatives. The ability to say, and at least 79% of our population understood what it was for, and there were, I mean, we got 45% yes vote. The ability to say, almost like in a recoupment, the different costs, let's say I think I've got an old meter that's not efficient or it leaks, or I think I've had too many estimates on my bill.
I was not suggesting that this was being successful. I was just saying that legally you could do it.
The cost of a new meter, Chris, is $900. What's a new meter cost?
$350 or?
For our guys to put in, it's about $500, yeah. So.
And to have the new meter with an AMI transmitter on it where I could get the information on my smartphone about my consumption, there may be customers willing to pay. And I wouldn't even call it a premium. I'd say you're just paying for your new meter with your AMI capabilities, so you can look at your consumption at your home or your business anytime. Is there a level like you have to have X number before the technology could be implemented?
So really, can I say this? We're losing 20% of our water. We don't know where it goes. Okay, so $20 million coming in the door, right, for the water we're making, and we don't know where 20% of that goes. So that's $4 million. So a lot of companies come to us and say, wow, you're so efficient on your metering. We will come do it and do it. They say you can do it without raising your rates, because if you'll just get people to pay for what they're using, there's enough money to cover the cost of replacing your meter. So I don't think we can have people opt in to what if they want to replace their meters. We have to go replace these meters because we're not capturing the water that's going out. Everyone's not paying their fair amount, right? And so I think this is an opportunity. If you're going to have to go touch a meter, put in a new one. Let's put in this where the whole industry is going, and it also gives you these extra things, but that's really not why we're doing it as a utility. It's because we're trying to run a professional utility and recapture those costs of that water we're making at the water plant, so everybody's paying a fair amount, so it's fair, right? That's really the goal here, and this is so good. That's what he's going to show you now is the payback. It'll pay itself back without raising any rates. They're thinking about 12 years.
So you could issue debt, install all the meters, and it does pay for itself.
To Chris's point, yeah, AWWA says you should replace every meter every 15, 20 years just based on, the accuracy of degrading over time. And
We pay it off.
yeah, no, we don't have that program in place now, so we have meters that are a lot older than that. So, like you say, if we're going to touch a meter, should we go back and put the 1980s type technology, or should we put the new technology in here where we see the benefits? And so, just kind of showing this graph here.
Councilmember Studley?
Do you want to?
I'm still kind of stuck on what Councilmember Lynn was saying, and that is an interesting thought. And what you had mentioned, Mayor Clark, is what about the people that voted yes? What if I'd be willing to pay an extra $5 a month so I can get advanced technology? And I understand what you're saying. We need to replace them all, or it's kind of pointless. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about a pilot program, right?
No, this would be going for the whole replacement, meter replacement.
Right, but I'm saying he's giving us different options right now. He's saying we can try a pilot program with this, or we can go all in with this. Well, what if we kind of meet somewhere in the middle, and what if we get the 75% replacement with people in the community plus our funding? I'm trying to just think of different ways where we could.
Then we don't get the grant money.
We won't get the grant money at all?
We won't get
75%, that's what I'm saying. If we have enough people that are willing to do it, but I don't know, that would probably take forever to get.
We'd have
Yeah. So, great idea. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around it. It just seems like way too much work than the time that we have, and we need to get this done ASAP. Because again, I will say it, water is life. And I love you, DC Jackson, but why would we need police if we can't even drink our water here? Just saying.
All right, Councilor Peacock?
Yeah, I did have a question, but Mr. Mattingly pretty much answered exactly what I was going to ask. And so I'll just go out and say that, $1 today is worth less than $1 tomorrow. So if we're able to recoup this cost, $12 million cost in about 12 years, I think we'd be fools to not at least explore the idea.
Councilmember Tortorella?
Hey, Chris, just to clarify what you're saying that we can make this happen without any increased user fees?
Yes.
Okay, just by making up for the loss of water every month.
That's what the companies are coming to us saying, they'll do it for us.
Right.
Because it's such a good deal.
I walked out with your guys one day and in Brookhaven, and they were picking up with a steel pipe every lid, reading it and putting it back. So I can see why you guys are far behind schedule and getting these bills out, because you only have 5 guys on payroll to do this. So I think it's a good idea without raising user fees to go all in, because this is what we've been discussing for the last year I've been on council, is to go ahead and get these meters in, because we're losing money on water. There's a constituent, Kelly, in your Brookhaven area that complains about losing, with big water bills, because she doesn't know where the leak is at. So if water is life, this is a good idea to go ahead and do it all at one time and get it done with it. I don't have to wrap my head around it. If the money is there, we can get the grant and the loan. I said we just go and do it now. Get it done now, because like you said, today's dollar is worth less tomorrow. Why wait? If it pays it up, if you say it pays itself off in 12 years.
What's the actual repayback you got figured?
Somewhere between about 11 years. So, but when we get the grant.
That's a good ROI.
Yes.
In my book, it's good ROI. If it's going to save money, save water, and detect leaks, which is the biggest problem I've seen so far.
Yeah. So our consultant, when they did their analysis, so it's not just us putting numbers on paper. We hired eSource to do that, and they're the ones that presented. It was 15 years, but when you factor in the grant that we get free money, so 11, 12 years, yeah.
Councilmember Holman?
Yeah, I really support whatever your staff thinks that we need to do with whatever resources we have. I'd like to do it all, 100%. I would like to know what projects we would not be able to do if we're spending all of our money on this. So it wouldn't be a rate increase to do it, but I would want voters to understand that your rate's not going up. We're going to do this, but it means we're not going to be able to do all these other projects you're wanting to understand.
I hear you. We're working with MFS, the financing group. We will have a loan payment of $1 million a year, which will come off of. Remember, I was telling you we only have $5-6 million left a year to do the project.
Yeah.
So this is cutting $1 million off of that, and so it is. It's trying to get your priorities where you're going to spend the money.
Yeah.
but at least this one will make a return on it. And then Anthony's elbowing me here.
As he should.
Old meters, you're not gonna pay less.
Right.
That's a fallacy. The meters only hurt us. And it's not us. What we try to do is we need to pay, everybody needs to pay their fair share. That's what you gotta say. So old meters, older parts of town, down around my house, if I have a really old meter, it spins slower and slower and slower, and water's whistling by, and we're not getting the money for what I use. That's not fair. A brand new neighborhood, theirs is a brand new meter, or new meters, they'll spin true and charge exactly what it needs to be. I've never even heard of one where a meter can spin faster than what the water goes through. So it will always it'll bring more money in the door and try to recapture the money that we're charging to make it.
With the rates that are in the books today,
Yeah.
already voter approved.
But you need to understand that the impact of that to the ratepayer is a rate increase. Their bill is going to go up.
Because it's more accurately read.
It's more accurately read. And just know that my utility customer service reps and you are going to receive those phone calls when those meters are replaced. Don't sugarcoat.
That's right. No, I'm not. When we have a person call us and say, I want my meter replaced, we tell them that. We say, it's only gonna it'll charge more. I want a new meter. This one's old and I don't trust it. And sure enough, that's what he said is accurate. You put in the new meter, it spins true, and it actually will make more money come in the door.
And it's $1 million for 11 years. $1 million off the top.
The finance
For
payment.
I'm not gonna question what the consultant said.
But that's.
Oh, the payback. The payback's 11-year payback.
We estimated a 10-year loan, and it's about $1.5 million annual payments.
Okay.
But the payback is still 11 years.
Okay.
Go for what I say.
Okay, Councilor Schuler.
I know we all want to talk. To this point, and I think to Councilmember Holman's, bringing this conversation up about, like, we just had a failed rate increase, and now, I believe in doing this 100%, like going for it. I think that we need to do it for the health of our utility, for being able to understand where our water is going, to be able to have everybody pay their fair share. But my question is, how are we going to educate our community like we were trying to do on our water rate increase? Because there is so much education to how this needs to move forward, like why we are doing this, how we're paying for it, what is not going to get paid for, why we're doing these things. Like, there needs to be some kind of concerted education campaign when we make this decision.
So, to Councilmember Schuler's point, our ability in what would be the next wonderful education opportunity, obviously, in order to incur debt, council action will be taken. Had the rate increase been approved, this project would have taken place without indebtedness. We were completely honest when we told our community and our customers, we need this technology. We're losing 20% of our water somewhere. We have to know where this 20% is going. If you had a retail store and 20% of your inventory was going out the door every year, you wouldn't be in business very long. So, ratepayers, we appreciate your reality that for whatever reason you voted no. We still need to do this. We still have to capture the 20%. So instead of paying for it with rates, we're going to bring a debt instrument to council, and we'll be able to highlight the fact that we will be accurately reading and billing for all of the water going through our system, and you're still going to get all the benefits that we talked about during the rate increase education. You're going to be able to have, on-demand access from your smartphone to tell you exactly how much each customer, each meter is using. But I think that education can begin when we bring you the debt instrument request to
I
council.
think it's my hope that through this process and being able to understand where that water is going, that this will help continue the process of educating our residents
And hopefully
on
build some trust.
water and trust, and say, like, this is why we needed this. And if it wasn't clear earlier that this was the piece that people were not paying attention to in the
Right.
water rate based on the survey results. Like
Right.
they were hearing conversations about, increase in bills and, line repair and then the DEQ requirement stuff, but like this kind of was under the radar and under the surface. So I don't know if people really quite understood how, I think, essential this piece was to building and propping up the other parts of our utility. So I think that this could help continue that process forward of saying, like, this is why.
And smaller bites of the big giant elephant. Those 3 capital projects were 3 big giant elephants, and we if we can just start taking one bite at a time, that's how we'll eventually get where we need to get. This, of the 3 projects, is the only one that actually generates additional revenue. The other 2, they just cost money.
But as you're educating people on why your bills are going up, even though we didn't get a rate increase, you're also going to have to educate them on why we just didn't do this without sending it to vote and clarifying
Right.
that, well, now we had to do debt, which means we have $1.5 million less for water line replacements.
Yes.
So,
I think you're, again, forgetting those separate roles of council member and utility authority trustee. This was going to be a debt issuance regardless. The voters would have been passing a rate increase to provide the revenue to
pay
offset
for
the
it.
debt service.
but now we don't have.
In this case, you're bringing in additional revenue by more truly billing our customers, i.e. a rate increase to generate that revenue. I don't want council, I don't want the authority trustees to making this decision without understanding what you're doing. You're doing the same thing. You are prioritizing this revenue generating project above the pipe replacement projects and above the water treatment project because it generates the revenue to pay for it by increasing the cost to the customer. Don't sugarcoat that that's what you're doing.
All right,
It's a revenue bond.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Foreman?
Is this what you want, Mr. Mattingly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think he says a rate increase, it's the same rates.
Right.
It's your cash register, instead of giving so many frees out and then charging these, only so many people are paying for the water, and some
Right.
people are getting free.
Yeah, you're,
I'm just gonna make it more
it's a
efficient.
misnomer
Everybody
to say
pay.
we don't know where the water is going.
Right.
It's going to our customers' faucets. It's just that we're not billing
for
them.
it.
We don't know
That's
who
a
is responsible for
To me,
paying
this
for
makes
it.
us more efficient, plus
Okay.
we will be better on customer service when I answer the phone and say, I can tell last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, you were using water somewhere. And I don't have to wait 60 days while their toilet was
Right.
running and going down the sewer and I lost all that water. I can contact them within 4 or 5 days. It's just more efficient. Why wouldn't we want to be more efficient? And BOR saying, I want you to be efficient so much, I'm gonna give you $2 million. Please go this direction.
So I know that according to this person, we're just concerned with our own political interests on this topic. But how quickly, if council were to approve this, how quickly could we get moving on
Slow
it?
process, it's not easy.
It's slow.
41,000 meters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd take a
Well,
year
like
and a
getting
half to
the
install.
debt,
Yeah, 2 years.
the loan application
2 years.
approved, like when are we breaking ground? What's the timeline for approval?
I would say a few months, Anthony, probably till we get the loan. And then, I mean, we need to talk with BOR on their timeline as
The loan
well.
is basically the big capital cost of providing the hardware and software to capture the data.
Right.
It's cellular technology, basically.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's say that that's $2 million of the $15 million project. And the remaining $13 million is to put 40,000 meters in the ground. Putting 40,000 meters in the ground takes 2 years, year and a half, 2 years, okay? But if we're going to sell a $15 million revenue bond, what we have to sell as the revenue to back that is this consultant saying, you're going to generate this much additional revenue by more accurately billing your customers for the water that they're already using. And I don't know how easy of a sell that is.
Councilor Studley.
I appreciate what you're saying, Anthony, but it's not a rate increase. Will their bill go up? Yes, but not because of a rate increase, because it's an accurate reading.
But it's
So
like a
I do-
ladder.
Yeah, but I don't think it's fair to say it's a rate increase. Like you're paying for what you're using. Finally, you're paying what everyone else is paying. Like that's to me what it is. If we're gonna do this, let's go all in. And I support doing the option 3D at 100% if we're gonna do it. It's pointless to do 75%.
Councilman Tortorella.
You know, I agree with you guys that we need to educate our residents like now, because they're gonna see this as a rate increase. And thank God we're not gonna do the fees, because they're gonna go and revolt against us, but I agree, this is something that we need to do. And the sooner we start educating and having conversations about this, I think the better it is in the long run when we actually start the project here. So let's do this thing. I'm all in too. So I did say it earlier, I am all in. We need this. And the guys that are working this, they are working their butts off here. And people are getting inaccurate bills. Sometimes they're not getting bills for like 3 months, and then they get a bill in the 4th month, and it's like $1,000. It's only because you guys are catching up with the billing process here. And that's really not fair to our residents, if you look at it in the whole, that if this is a city-run enterprise, it should be as efficient as possible. That's our responsibility. So, you know, we need to go forward on this, and this should be done at the 100%. Get it done now, pull the Band-Aid off, and just go forward.
Thank you. Councilor Hall.
I just wanted to clarify, the 2 million, we know we've been awarded that, right?
BOR has told us yes.
And then the state funding, the another 500,000, is that over and above the 2 million?
That would be above the 2
Okay, so
million.
that would be added too?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
The BOR is, like, we're already locked in on that one if we move forward with the project, but the OWRB one, we still have to compete with other communities.
So would it be safe to say we do have consensus to move forward with a program for 100% meter replacement with AMI?
God, Daryl, that's my line.
Make it so.
We're doing what we
No
can.
cries of outrage.
Action items to absolutely make that so. Thank you.
No, thank you for a great presentation and being thorough as always. All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Make it work.